Have you ever wondered how prison walls fail to stop organized crime? What if I told you that some of America's deadliest cartels are run by men locked inside concrete cells? This is not a movie, it's real. From the Mexican Mafia to Barrio Azteca, we'll uncover how prison gangs control drug empires, execute hits and shape cartel wars, all from behind bars. Before we dive deep, hit subscribe and like this video, because what you're about to hear is one of the darkest, most powerful stories of the criminal underworld. Prison is supposed to break you, but for the Mexican Mafia, known as LAIM, it became a fortress. Born in the 1950s inside the walls of Dual Vocational Institution in California, LAIM wasn't just another inmate clique. It was a revolutionary shift in how power worked behind bars. Their goal wasn't survival, it was domination. Within years, they controlled gambling, protection, and contraband across California's prison system. By the 1970s, their reach extended beyond the yard. Street gangs in Los Angeles, San Diego, and Bakersfield pledged allegiance to them, branding themselves as Sureños, Southerners. These weren't random affiliations, they were military alliances. The Sureños would serve as LAIM's army on the streets, sending money and loyalty back to their imprisoned commanders. Prison became a headquarters, not a cage. Smuggled letters, coded phone calls, and visits disguised as family reunions kept orders flowing from solitary confinement to street corners hundreds of miles away. Investigators found that LAIM's generals used seemingly harmless letters, discussing football games or barbecues, as coded instructions for killings and drug runs. The result? A shadow empire run from steel and concrete. Inmates transferred between facilities became messengers. A simple tattoo, the letter M in black ink, signaled loyalty and terror. To disrespect LAIM meant a death sentence that could be carried out anywhere. A prison yard, a neighborhood park, even across the border. The DA would later discover how this network evolved into a cartel-grade structure. Meth and heroin shipments from Sinaloa and Michoacana were funneled through Sureño operatives, distributed through U.S. prisons, and laundered through family businesses. Each link, from street dealer to incarcerated shot caller, was part of a disciplined, brutal hierarchy. And all of it, every kilo, every killing, every dollar, could be traced back to one cell block command. Inside Pelican Bay and Corcoran State Prison, LAIM leaders issued green lights, orders to kill or assault enemies with a single coded message. A phone call to a girlfriend could trigger a street war. A note smuggled through a legal visit could redirect drug shipments worth millions. By the 1990s, federal investigators realized something shocking. The Mexican Mafia didn't just survive incarceration, it thrived on it. Prison was their Silicon Valley. A breeding ground for leadership, logistics, and loyalty. Every new inmate was a potential recruit. Every lockdown, a boardroom meeting. Even rival gangs outside learned the same lesson. The Nuestra Familia in Northern California, the Texas Syndicate, and Barrio Azteca would soon replicate the model, proving that America's prison system had unintentionally created a network of organized criminal states within its own walls. And for the cartels south of the border, these networks were gold. They didn't need to smuggle new soldiers into the U.S. They already had thousands behind bars, disciplined, ruthless, and loyal. As the 2000s dawned, this unholy alliance between cartels and prison gangs would evolve into something much darker. A partnership where death warrants were signed behind bars and executed in broad daylight across the border. By the early 2000s, law enforcement realized the Mexican Mafia wasn't just an American prison gang, it was a branch office of the Mexican cartels themselves. What began as a violent inmate brotherhood inside California's cell blocks had evolved into a vast, disciplined network moving narcotics, collecting debts, and carrying out assassinations, all on behalf of cartel partners across the border. At the center of this transformation stood LAIM's street army, the Sureños. Thousands of small Southern California gangs, from San Diego's Logan Heights clique to Los Angeles's Florencia 13, swore allegiance to them inside. Each pledged obedience to a handful of imprisoned generals who ruled through fear, loyalty, and an iron system of taxation. Every Sureño gang on the streets owed la renta, a tax on every bag of drugs sold, every stolen car flipped, every hit carried out. The money flowed back to prisons in steady rivers of cash, sometimes smuggled through visitors, sometimes wired through shell companies, sometimes hidden in commissary accounts under fake names. Those funds purchased power, influence with guards, cell phones, contraband, and connections to the cartels that supplied their product. The Mexican Pipeline. In 2003, a DEA investigation known as Operation Black Rain uncovered something extraordinary. Through encrypted messages passed by inmates in Pelican Bay and Folsom Prison, the Mexican Mafia was coordinating directly with emissaries from the Sinaloa Cartel and La Familia Michoacana. The cartel supplied meth and heroin at wholesale. The Sureños distributed it through California, Arizona, and Nevada. The profits were shared, and the prisons served as the command centers. In one intercepted message, a LAIM member ordered his street lieutenant to move the ice south, use the Brown Boys trucks, a cryptic reference to cartel transporters. Another message discussed cleaning the yard, meaning a planned purge of rival gang members in a Los Angeles neighborhood who resisted paying taxes. These weren't idle threats. When a Florencia 13 crew refused to hand over proceeds from heroin sales in 2007, LAIM ordered retribution. Within weeks, 7 members were dead. Police found that each hit had been coordinated by inmates serving life sentences, using contraband cell phones hidden inside the state's most secure facilities. Prison as cartel command. By 2010, U.S. federal agencies, the DEA, FBI, and ATF, acknowledged what insiders already knew: Mexican cartels had fused with American prison gangs. The Sureños became the cartel's U.S. distribution network, and LAIM became the cartel's domestic enforcers. Cartel leaders like El Chapo Guzman understood that control inside U.S. prisons meant control of the U.S. market. The relationship was symbiotic. Cartels needed infrastructure: soldiers, dealers, debt collectors. LAIM needed supply, drugs, guns, and money. From their cells, LAIM shot callers coordinated not just street sales but interstate pipelines. Investigators traced shipments of meth produced in Mexico's Golden Triangle to safe houses in San Bernardino and Bakersfield, both run by Sureño gangs acting under direct prison orders. Inside prison walls, coded kites, tiny notes folded like razor blades, traveled faster than official mail. Each kite carried orders that could shift thousands of dollars in product or dozens of lives on the streets. A captain in Pelican Bay could order a Sureño leader in East LA to attack a rival, and within hours the message would reach the target's neighborhood. The Barrio Azteca alliance. But LAIM wasn't the only one building bridges to Mexico. In Texas, another power was rising: the Barrio Azteca. Formed in the 1980s inside El Paso and Juárez prisons, Barrio Azteca began as a brotherhood for Latino inmates seeking protection. But by the late 1990s, it had become the armed wing of the Juárez Cartel. Members on both sides of the border maintained constant communication. When U.S. authorities intercepted cartel radios in 2009, they found that several Azteca members, including imprisoned ones, were giving real-time instructions to street hit teams. They used military-style call signs: Alpha 1, Bravo 3, Green Light, and spoke in code about packages, drugs, and parties hits. One of the most chilling revelations came in 2011 when federal prosecutors charged 35 Barrio Azteca members with racketeering, murder, and drug trafficking. Investigators uncovered that imprisoned Azteca leaders had ordered the assassination of 3 people linked to the U.S. Consulate in Ciudad Juárez, an act of revenge ordered directly by the cartel. The killings were carried out with precision: ambushes, checkpoints, and radio coordination, all planned through messages smuggled from Texas prisons. Beyond bars, a network without walls. By now the blueprint was clear. Every major prison gang, LAIM, Barrio Azteca, Texas Syndicate, Aryan Brotherhood, and even the Black Guerrilla family, had learned that incarceration no longer meant isolation. Instead, it meant command. Using cell phones, corrupt guards, encrypted letters, and social media accounts run by family members, these gangs operated like militarized cartels. The modern prison was no longer a place of punishment, it was a hub of transnational criminal strategy. And with every arrest, the cartels only grew stronger. Each new convict brought fresh connections, new territory, and another cell to command from. What was once a local California problem had become a continental enterprise, a criminal ecosystem spanning from the yards of Pelican Bay to the streets of Juárez and beyond. In the early 2000s, Ciudad Juárez was ground zero for one of the most violent cartel wars in modern history. The fight between the Juárez Cartel and the Sinaloa Cartel turned the city into a battlefield. Bodies hung from bridges, houses burned in daylight, and gunfire became the city's soundtrack. But what many people didn't realize, at least not at first, was that much of this war wasn't being directed from the streets. It was being commanded from inside U.S. prisons. Behind the bloodshed stood Barrio Azteca, a gang born inside El Paso jails and Texas state prisons. What started as a local inmate group, formed for protection and solidarity, had, by the 1990s, become the Juárez Cartel's most trusted ally and enforcer. The alliance was both strategic and deadly. The cartel controlled the supply and Barrio Azteca controlled the streets, the prisons and the hit squads. From Texas cells to Mexican streets. Barrio Azteca's strength came from its dual identity. On one side of the border, members served long sentences in Texas prisons, often for drug trafficking, robbery or murder. On the other, their brothers in Juárez ran street-level operations, smuggling cocaine, heroin and meth into the United States. What connected both worlds was communication. Using smuggled phones, encrypted letters and visits disguised as family meetings, imprisoned leaders coordinated with free members to organize logistics, collect debts and order killings. Federal prosecutors later revealed that the gang operated under a strict military-style structure. Generals, captains, lieutenants and soldiers. Everyone had a role. No one acted without orders. One prison leader, nicknamed Choco, acted as a liaison between incarcerated generals and cartel commanders. Through coded messages, he would instruct lieutenants in Juárez to deliver packages, drugs, or carry out jobs, executions. Payments flowed in reverse, from cartel cash handlers in Mexico to commissary accounts and family members in El Paso. The Consulate killings, a message in blood. The world first learned the true scale of this alliance in March 2010. That day, 3 people linked to the U.S. Consulate in Ciudad Juárez, a consulate employee, her husband and another man, were ambushed and murdered after leaving a children's birthday party. Investigators found more than 80 shell casings at the scene. The attacks were coordinated, military-style and deliberate. At first it seemed senseless, until the truth emerged. Barrio Azteca members, acting on cartel orders, had mistaken the victims for members of a rival faction connected to the Sinaloa cartel. What shocked authorities wasn't just the brutality, it was the origin of the order. The assassination was planned from inside a Texas prison. Inmates used contraband cell phones to relay instructions to the Juárez street wing. Messages crossed borders in real time, passing through encrypted BlackBerry devices. The FBI later revealed that Barrio Azteca hitmen had a network of spotters stationed across Juárez, armed with radios tracking targets and reporting movements as the killers closed in. Following the attack, a sweeping investigation called Operation Knockdown led to the indictment of 35 Barrio Azteca members. Among them were both imprisoned leaders and free operatives. The case exposed a terrifying truth. The gang's command structure didn't crumble behind bars, it expanded. Every arrest added another node to the communication web. How the alliance worked. The relationship between Barrio Azteca and the Juárez cartel was unlike any other. It wasn't just about drugs, it was about mutual survival. The Juárez cartel provided shipments of cocaine and heroin, paying Barrio Azteca for protection, distribution and enforcement. In return, the gang offered manpower, armed, disciplined and ruthless, on both sides of the border. The gang used Texas prisons to recruit and train. Young inmates from El Paso, Houston and San Antonio were indoctrinated behind bars. When released, they already had orders waiting, a contact, a shipment or a target. The prison became a military academy for cartel enforcers. And the rules were absolute. Betrayal was death. Disobedience was death. Failure was death. Members used tattoos, coded hand signs, and Spanish slang to identify one another. A tattoo of BA, intertwined with Aztec imagery, wasn't just art, it was allegiance. Once marked, there was no escape. Even transfers to other prisons didn't sever ties. Instead, they expanded the network across state and federal systems. When borders don't matter. By 2012, the FBI and DA recognized that traditional policing methods couldn't dismantle this hybrid structure. Arrests didn't end leadership, they simply relocated it. The gang's influence stretched from El Paso County Jail to the maximum security wings of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, and all the way into Juárez barrios. One investigator described it bluntly. The walls don't contain them. The phone is the new weapon. From inside, leaders orchestrated the flow of heroin across the border, controlled extortion rackets, and even mediated disputes between rival factions of the Juárez cartel. When the Sinaloa cartel began pushing into Juárez territory, it wasn't the cartel's top boss who organized resistance. It was inmates in U.S. prisons directing Azteca soldiers on the streets. The war claimed over 10,000 lives in just 4 years. Each bullet fired on the streets of Juárez echoed from a prison cell hundreds of miles away. Aftermath and legacy. By the mid-2010s, federal authorities launched Operation Borderland Express, targeting Barrio Azteca's communication lines. Dozens of phones were seized. Key lieutenants were isolated in supermax units. Yet the system proved resilient. Even solitary confinement couldn't silence them. Using coded legal mail and corrupt staff, messages still flowed. The gang had become what experts now call a distributed criminal organism. Impossible to fully decapitate because every imprisoned member could act as a new command node. Today the legacy of Barrio Azteca continues. Though weakened by arrests and rivalries, its model of transnational gang cartel partnership inspired dozens of copycats. From California to Illinois, prison gangs began seeing incarceration not as an obstacle but as a strategic advantage. When most people picture organized crime, they imagine drug smuggling across dusty borders or cash exchanges in dark alleys. But the real genius of prison gangs isn't just violence, it's economics. Behind bars, where everything from food to phone calls costs money, gangs built a parallel financial system, invisible to the public, nearly untouchable by law enforcement, and worth millions of dollars a year. What started as survival, trading cigarettes, ramen noodles, and commissary, evolved into a sophisticated money laundering empire, run from cells and hidden behind families, girlfriends, and fake businesses. And at the heart of it all sat the same familiar names: the Mexican Mafia, the Texas Syndicate, and Barrio Azteca, turning pennies into power. Inmates don't have bank accounts, but gangs found creative ways to move and hide their profits. When a street dealer sold drugs for a prison-based gang, the payment didn't go to the inmate directly. Instead, it was transferred to a trusted contact on the outside, often a girlfriend, cousin, or mother. That person would then move the money through a chain of shell accounts, small businesses, or prepaid debit cards. For example, a single Sureño clique in Los Angeles might owe La Renta, a 10% tax, to their Laim boss inside Pelican Bay. That payment could come as $1,000 cash dropped off at a gas station, or an online transfer to a small cleaning company secretly controlled by an inmate's relative. That money, once cleaned, would then fund commissary accounts, lawyer fees, and bribes to guards, or be used to buy more drugs from cartel suppliers. This created what federal investigators later called a shadow economy, a self-sustaining network where dirty street profits re-entered the prison system as legitimate funds. Commissary and corruption. Inside prison walls, every basic need, from toothpaste to phone time, is a commodity. Gangs weaponized that reality. They controlled commissary trades, selling essentials at inflated prices. They loaned food or hygiene items to weaker inmates, charging interest payable through favors or violence. In some cases, gangs taxed even innocent transactions, demanding a cut whenever someone bought or sold items inside the yard. But the real money was outside. Family members of incarcerated gang leaders often ran fake GoFundMe-style donation pages, claiming to raise money for legal defense or re-entry support. In truth, these donations came from street affiliates and were funneled through multiple accounts to conceal their origin. When the FBI's Operation Dirty Water hit in 2016, agents discovered over $3.2 million moved through just 7 such accounts connected to imprisoned Laim members. Each transaction was small enough to avoid suspicion, $300 here, $500 there, but together they funded weapons, narcotics, and even cartel payoffs. The business of blood. Violence was the enforcement tool that kept this economy alive. If someone failed to pay La Renta, the consequences were immediate. Family members on the outside were threatened, attacked, or killed. In one chilling 2008 case, a Sureño gang member in Bakersfield was found murdered after refusing to send proceeds to his imprisoned shot caller. Investigators later traced the hit order back to Corcoran State Prison, relayed through a contraband phone call and confirmed via text messages hidden in a girlfriend's phone. Each gang operated like a corporate structure. The shot caller acted as CEO. Lieutenants managed logistics and enforcement. Street soldiers collected payments and distributed drugs. Family contacts functioned as accountants and money mules. Every dollar that entered this ecosystem strengthened the gang's reach, financing new deals, corrupting guards, and expanding into legitimate industries like construction, auto repair, and used car lots. Money through mail and mobile. When authorities cracked down on wire transfers and cash drops, the gangs adapted again. They turned to digital laundering. Prepaid debit cards, cryptocurrency, and online payment apps became their new tools. Some Laim members began using Bitcoin wallets managed by outside contacts, converting cartel drug profits into untraceable digital currency. Even prison tablets, the ones meant for inmates to make monitored video calls or access e-learning, became financial tools. Investigators discovered that coded messages sent through these systems contained not words of affection, but instructions for laundering funds or coordinating street collections. As one federal investigator said during a 2019 press conference, they turned the system built to rehabilitate them into a business platform. Front companies and families. Perhaps the most ingenious part of this operation was how legitimate it looked. In many cases, gang families ran real businesses: car washes, towing companies, landscaping firms. These fronts handled genuine customers but also served as financial filters for drug money. Invoices were faked, payments were disguised, and bookkeeping records were deliberately blurred. One famous case involved Ruben Tupac Cavazos, a leader of the Mongols motorcycle club who acted as a liaison for Laim. His associates ran a series of auto repair shops in Southern California that funneled cartel profits directly into inmate accounts under the guise of maintenance contracts. When federal agents finally shut it down, they found a paper trail linking prison gang leaders to over $6 million in laundered funds. And that was only what they could prove. From the yard to Wall Street. By the 2020s, analysts began comparing prison gang economies to corporate conglomerates. They weren't just running drugs. They were investing in real estate, vehicles, and crypto portfolios through intermediaries. Some even paid tax professionals to file fake returns to claim refunds, using stolen identities. Prisons like Pelican Bay, Corcoran, and the Texas Department of Criminal Justice's Styles Unit became control hubs, boardrooms made of concrete. The message was clear. Incarceration no longer disrupted organized crime, it institutionalized it. As one ex-FBI analyst put it, they don't just survive prison. They run it like a Fortune 500 company, with murder as their enforcement clause. By the late 2010s, the lines between American prison gangs and Mexican cartels had all but vanished. What began decades earlier as alliances of convenience had turned into an integrated criminal network, one that operated simultaneously across U.S. prisons, Mexican border towns, and major American cities. The walls, meant to isolate these criminals, had instead become communication centers for cartel warfare. Inside the walls of Pelican Bay, Corcoran, and the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, rival factions were no longer just fighting for power within the prison yard, they were proxy forces for rival cartels. The Sinaloa Cartel, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG, and the Juárez Cartel, each using incarcerated gangs to extend influence into the U.S. The inmates who started a war. The first visible spark came in 2015, when intelligence officers intercepted coded letters between members of Laim and Sinaloa-linked traffickers. The messages spoke of cutting the supply line and cleaning house. Weeks later, coordinated assaults erupted in multiple California prisons. Sureños attacked inmates affiliated with the Texas Syndicate, a gang suspected of aligning with CJNG's rising power. To outsiders, it looked like random prison violence. But inside law enforcement circles, it was recognized for what it was: the first cartel war fought inside U.S. prisons. DA reports that same year detailed how Sinaloa emissaries inside American prisons were supplying money to Laim-connected distributors, while CJNG operatives were recruiting smaller Hispanic gangs with promises of direct cartel protection and profit sharing. One federal investigator called it the globalization of incarceration. He said, "We used to think the cartel problem was across the border. Now it's across the cell block." Weaponizing the prison system. Control of the yard meant control of distribution. Cartels realized that whoever dominated a prison controlled its re-entry pipeline, the hundreds of inmates released each year, who would return home loyal to whoever protected them inside. These returning inmates became field commanders, turning entire neighborhoods into cartel-linked territories. The Bureau of Prisons, BOP, tried isolating gang leaders in special housing units, but isolation only strengthened them. A Laim leader serving a life sentence in Pelican Bay was caught using a contraband phone to communicate with a Sinaloa representative in Culiacan, planning drug routes through Arizona and New Mexico. Another investigation found that a CJNG affiliate in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice used his prison job in the mailroom to smuggle encrypted instructions out of the facility. When authorities cracked down, the gangs simply shifted tactics, hiding messages in Bible pages, court paperwork, or even tattoos that conveyed coded meaning during visits. By 2018, these methods had become so advanced that the DA called prison gangs the invisible logistics arm of the cartels. Violence without borders. Every battle fought on the street echoed behind bars. Inmates affiliated with rival cartels began targeting each other inside prisons. Stabbings, ambushes, and orchestrated riots became routine. A 2019 riot at USP Beaumont left 3 inmates dead and 8 wounded, all traced back to conflicts between Sinaloa-linked Sureños and CJNG-aligned Texas inmates. Even in maximum security, gangs operated as intelligence networks. They monitored visiting lists, tracked mail, and kept databases of rivals' family members. Prisoners serving life terms began treating violence like currency, trading hits for favor, power, or protection. Each killing sent a message not just within the prison system, but to cartel bosses in Mexico. Loyalty, vengeance, and dominance were still in full effect. The digital evolution. The arrival of smuggled smartphones and contraband internet access changed everything. No longer relying on word of mouth or coded letters, prison gangs began using encrypted apps like WhatsApp, Telegram, and even Facebook Marketplace to conduct operations. They recruited online, laundered through cryptocurrency, and monitored news coverage to measure their impact. In one 2021 case, an inmate at Kern Valley State Prison used a smuggled smartphone to livestream gang orders disguised as rap music uploads. Each song lyric contained coded instructions to associates in Los Angeles and Phoenix. When authorities decrypted it, they discovered it described drug pickup locations and payment splits. The prison walls had become transparent. Information flowed faster than ever, turning every facility into a cartel's communication hub. The new age of organized confinement. Today, law enforcement faces an unprecedented challenge. Prison gangs are no longer simply criminal organizations. They are hybrid cartels. They tax, they enforce, they recruit, and they expand. Each arrest doesn't destroy the network. It feeds it. Every new inmate becomes a new recruit, every smuggled phone a new command center. Experts warn that the Mexican Mafia, Barrio Azteca, and their affiliates have transformed prisons into what some call incubators of transnational crime. The walls are there, but the control flows outwards, into cities, streets, and digital spaces. In short, the cartels don't need to infiltrate the U.S. anymore. They already run part of it, from inside. What you've just learned is the chilling truth about how prison gangs evolved from protection cliques into powerful cartel extensions. From the Sureños of California to Barrio Azteca in Texas, these groups have turned incarceration into an empire, one fueled by drugs, money, and control that stretches across borders and generations. And this is only a fraction of the story. The next time you hear about a prison riot, a drug bust, or a cartel killing, remember, the command might not come from a mansion in Mexico, but from a 6 by 9 foot cell somewhere in America. If you found this story eye-opening like this video, subscribe and turn on notifications because we have more true crime documentaries coming, real stories that expose how the underworld operates behind bars and beyond. This is Behind Bars TV, where the walls don't hide the truth, they reveal it.